The history of frozen pizza. Discover the story behind America's favorite convenient meal. Hello and welcome to Crazy Food History, where we explore the world of food and drink. Are you a fan of frozen pizza? Do you love the convenience and delicious taste of this American classic? But have you ever stopped to wonder about the fascinating history behind this beloved meal? From its humble beginnings as a niche product sold by local pizza parlors to its domination of grocery store aisles across the nation, the story of frozen pizza is a true American success story. So, join us as today we explore the fascinating history of frozen pizza and discover the surprising and captivating tale behind America's favorite convenient meal in the next few minutes. Let's take a trip back in time to early 1950s America, where frozen pizza wasn't even an option for shoppers. Sure, pizza had become a popular cuisine thanks to Italian immigrants who brought it over to the US around 1900, but it wasn't until after World War II that it took off with the masses. As more Americans started buying home freezers in the 1940s and 50s, frozen dinners in general started to enter the picture. It was around this time that pizza restaurant owners began offering refrigerated pizzas for customers to cook at home. And in 1950, a New York City baker named Leo Giuffre started selling his version for 49 cents each. But it wasn't until some restaurant owners began selling frozen versions of their pizzas that the idea took off. Enter Joseph Bucci, who in 1950 filed the first official patent for frozen pizza, titled Method for Making Frozen Pizza. In the patent application, Bucci discussed the challenges of quick freezing pizza dough and the need for an edible sealing agent to prevent tomato sauce from ruining the dough's texture. But by the time his patent was granted in 1954, businesses had already been putting frozen pizzas on grocery shelves for a few years. America's frozen pizza business was mostly made up of regional players until the 1960s, when a few businesses started to achieve national fame. One of those businesses was TOTINO'S, which was founded by married couple Rose and Jim Totino in 1951 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. When they first took out a loan to open an Italian restaurant in Minnesota, Rose had to bake a pizza for her bank's loan officer because he'd never heard of pizza. That was how unknown the dish was at the time. In 1962, the Totino's began mass-producing frozen pizzas from a plant in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. They started with a small operation, but it quickly grew. By 1967, they were selling 120,000 pizzas a day, and by 1970, they were the largest frozen pizza manufacturer in the country. The company's signature pizza was the Party Pizza, which was a large rectangular pizza that could feed a crowd. By the 1970s, Totino's became the country's top-selling frozen pizza. Annual sales jumped from $10 million in 1970 to $50 million in 1974. The company's success was due in part to its aggressive marketing strategy. Totino's advertised heavily on TV, using catchy jingles and slogans like "Totino's, Totino's, everybody's talking about Totino's" to attract customers. They also sponsored sports events and ran promotions to give away free pizzas. The success of Totino's caught the attention of Pillsbury, one of the largest food companies in the world. Pillsbury saw the potential of the frozen pizza market and wanted to get in on the action. In 1975, the company bought Totino's for $22 million. The Totino's stayed on as consultants for a few years, but eventually retired from the business. Under Pillsbury's ownership, Totino's continued to grow. The company introduced new products like the popular Totino's pizza rolls, which were bite-sized dough pockets filled with cheese and sauce. The pizza rolls were an instant hit and quickly became one of the company's best-selling products. Today, Totino's is even better known as the leading purveyor of frozen pizza rolls, topping the frozen appetizers and snacks category with over $600 million in annual sales for the brand, according to IRI. In the succeeding decades, other huge firms, including Pillsbury, entered the market for frozen pizza by acquiring well-known family brands. Pillsbury was not alone in its endeavor. Other examples include Mama Celeste Frozen Pizza, which was established in Chicago in the early 1960s by Italian immigrant Celeste Lizio and later sold to Quaker Oats in 1969. And in the same year, the Simek brothers of Medford, Wisconsin switched from selling pizzas at their pub, the Tombstone Tap, to a business that sold frozen pizzas to other surrounding taverns as a means of expanding their customer base. They referred to their product as Tombstone Pizza, and by 1984, the business had grown to become one of the most successful frozen pizza distributors in the country, with annual sales of more than $100 million. 2 years later, Kraft Foods took ownership of Tombstone for a value that was not disclosed. As this was going on, the frozen food delivery company Schwan's finally joined the frozen pizza sector in 1970 when it bought the Kansas-based pizza manufacturer Tony's. According to Forbes, Schwan's countrywide distribution network was instrumental in Tony's rise to prominence as a national frozen pizza brand, which resulted in yearly sales of $80 million worth of pizzas by the middle of the 1970s. Subsequently, in 1976, Schwan's extended their pizza business by establishing Red Baron. Statista reports that Red Baron is currently one of the most successful frozen pizza brands in the country, with annual sales of over $570 million as of 2017. In the 1970s, Schwan's also began selling its frozen pizzas to schools. Within the next 4 decades, the business would come to hold 70% of the market for pizza sold in schools. By the early 1980s, the market for frozen pizza was worth $1 billion in overall annual revenue, and even federal authorities felt the need to weigh in by attempting to set norms for how much cheese a frozen meat pizza was required to have to be sold. This trend occurred as more and more large corporations entered the frozen pizza business. The year 1983 marked the beginning of the U.S. Department of Agriculture released a proposal that would have mandated all frozen pizzas with meat toppings to have cheese constitute a minimum of 12% of components, with fake cheese accounting for no more than 50% of that proportion. The USDA held authority exclusively over pizzas that contained meat toppings, while the Food and Drug Administration was responsible for pizzas that only contained cheese. This was reported by the Washington Post at the time. The FDA only required that producers who utilize imitation cheese made that information crystal clear on the labels of their products. However, the USDA's plan struck a chord with customers who responded with thousands of comments, many of which were supportive of the concept while others were critical. The dairy sector was obviously in favor of increased cheese standards for frozen pizzas, but many consumers simply wanted the federal government to leave their pizzas alone. Hence, the USDA ultimately abandoned the idea of its 12% minimum for cheese content in frozen pizzas. Aside from corporate takeovers and regulatory disputes, the next big shift in the frozen pizza market occurred in 1995, dubbed a momentous year for the product's history by the New York Times. It was the year Kraft's food experts presented what the New York Times called a food technology coup, the rising crust pizza. Kraft introduced its DIGIORNO brand of frozen pizzas in 1995 with a doughy crust that rises as it bakes. Kraft's innovation includes the addition of numerous food additives as well as oils, yeast, and baking soda to strengthen the dough and keep it hydrated rather than drying out. According to the Times, the company also introduced vacuum-sealed packaging to block away air, which erodes the dough. DiGiorno's rising crust brought the frozen pizza industry one step closer to imitating the average slice consumers may buy from their local pizza shop, which had been aiming for decades to eat into the multi-billion-dollar market of brick-and-mortar pizzerias. That fact was also emphasized by DiGiorno's now famous tagline, "It's not delivery, it's DiGiorno." DiGiorno has been the country's best-selling frozen pizza brand for more than 2 decades, with annual sales exceeding $1 billion. Nonetheless, after almost 7 decades, the frozen pizza market is still growing. Kraft Foods sold its pizza business in the United States and Canada, which included DiGiorno and Tombstone, to Nestle for $3.7 billion in cash in 2010. Today, the frozen pizza business in the United States is worth approximately $5 billion, with the global market being more than double that amount. According to Allied Market Research, the global market might be worth more than $17 billion in 2023. As we wrap up this journey through the history of frozen pizza, we hope you've gained a new appreciation for this beloved American convenience food. Today, it's a staple in households across the country, a go-to meal for busy weeknights or a quick and easy party snack. So, thanks for joining us today on this tasty adventure. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let us know what other food-related topics you would like us to cover. And until next time, happy eating!